I need to tell you something about Scorpios that most people completely misunderstand. And honestly, if you've ever felt intimidated by a Scorpio, or if you are one and you're tired of being labeled as intense or mysterious in ways that feel reductive, this is for you. There are 10 secrets about Scorpio energy that I believe will completely shift how you see this sign. And I'm not talking about the surface level stuff you read in generic horoscopes. I'm talking about the real, raw truths that explain why Scorpios operate the way they do, why they love the way they love, and why they're actually one of the most misunderstood signs in the entire Zodiac. Here's what I've been noticing. People either love Scorpios or they're terrified of them. There's rarely an in-between. And I think that's because most people only see the surface. The intensity. The penetrating stare. The ability to see right through you. But they miss what's underneath all of that. They miss the why. So if you've been curious about what really makes Scorpios tick, or if you're a Scorpio yourself and you want to understand your own energy better, stay with me. Because by the end of this, I think you're going to see Scorpio in a completely different light. And honestly, secret number 7. That's the one that changed everything for me. That's the one that made me realize we've been getting Scorpio energy wrong this whole time. But before we get there, I need to start with something most people don't know. Something that explains everything else that follows. Secret number 1. Scorpios don't trust easily because they see too much too soon. Here's what I think people misunderstand about Scorpios' trust issues. It's not that they're paranoid or suspicious by nature. It's that they're psychic in ways most people aren't. And I don't mean psychic like reading tarot cards or predicting the future. I mean they read energy, intention, and subtext with an accuracy that's honestly unsettling. Have you ever been around a Scorpio and felt like they could see straight through whatever mask you were wearing? Like they knew what you were thinking before you even said it? That's not a coincidence. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of the underworld, of hidden things, of what lies beneath the surface. And that planetary influence gives Scorpios this almost supernatural ability to detect what's not being said. They notice the micro-expressions that flash across your face for a split second. They pick up on the slight shift in your tone when you're lying. They feel the energy change in a room when someone's being inauthentic. And because they see all of this, because they're constantly processing layers of information that most people miss entirely, they become incredibly selective about who they let in. Think about it this way. If you could see people's true intentions, if you could sense when someone was using you or manipulating you or hiding something significant, wouldn't you be cautious too? Wouldn't you build walls to protect yourself from the people who aren't what they seem? This is why Scorpios come across as guarded. It's not that they don't want connection. They crave it more deeply than almost any other sign. But they've been burned too many times by people who presented one version of themselves and turned out to be something completely different. So they wait, they watch, they test, and only when they're absolutely certain that you're genuine, that your energy matches your words, that you're not going to betray them, only then do they let you in. And here's what's beautiful about this. When a Scorpio finally trusts you, when they decide you've passed their internal vetting process, the loyalty you get in return is unmatched. We're talking ride or die, defend you to the death, keep your secrets forever kind of loyalty. But you have to earn it first, and that earning process, it's not about grand gestures or impressive credentials. It's about consistency. It's about being exactly who you say you are. Every single time. In every single situation. I've seen this play out so many times. Someone meets a Scorpio and gets frustrated because the Scorpio won't open up right away. They interpret the guardedness as coldness or disinterest. But what's actually happening is the Scorpio is running a background check on your soul. They're watching how you treat the waiter, how you talk about people who aren't in the room, how you handle stress, how you respond when things don't go your way. They're gathering data. And if that data consistently shows them that you're trustworthy, that you have integrity, that you're not going to use their vulnerability against them, then suddenly that wall comes down. And when it does, you realize the wait was worth it. Secret number 2. Their intensity isn't aggression. It's passion filtered through depth. Okay, so this is probably the biggest misconception about Scorpios. People see their intensity and immediately label it as aggressive, confrontational, or too much. But here's what I've come to understand. Scorpio intensity isn't about being combative. It's about being incapable of doing anything halfway. Scorpios are a fixed water sign. Fixed means they're committed, stable, unwavering once they've decided on something. Water means they feel everything at an emotional depth most people can't even access. So when you combine those two qualities, you get someone who feels deeply and commits fully to whatever they're feeling. They don't do casual. They don't do surface level. They don't do lukewarm. When a Scorpio loves you, they love you with their entire being. When they're interested in a topic, they become obsessed with understanding every facet of it. When they commit to a goal, they pursue it with a single-minded focus that can honestly be intimidating to watch. And when they're hurt, they feel that pain in the deepest parts of their soul. This is why Scorpios can seem overwhelming to people who operate at a more moderate emotional frequency. It's not that Scorpios are trying to be intense. It's that they literally don't know how to be any other way. Asking a Scorpio to tone down their intensity is like asking fire to burn less hot. It's asking them to fundamentally change their nature. I think this is where a lot of relationship conflicts come from. Someone gets involved with a Scorpio, attracted to that passion and depth, but then gets scared when they realize the intensity doesn't turn off. It's not just passion in the good moments. It's passion in the arguments too. It's passion in the way they care about social issues. It's passion in the way they pursue their career. It's passion in everything. And here's what people miss. That intensity, when it's directed at you in a positive way, is one of the most incredible experiences you can have. To be loved by a Scorpio means to be seen, truly seen, in ways you've never been seen before. It means having someone who remembers every detail you've ever shared with them. It means having someone who will fight for you, defend you, support you with a ferocity that makes you feel invincible. But it also means you can't hide. You can't be half in. You can't give them pieces of yourself while holding the important parts back. Because Scorpios don't do partial connection. They want all of you. And they're willing to give all of themselves in return. And for people who aren't ready for that level of emotional intimacy, that level of being fully known, it can feel like too much. The thing is, Scorpios aren't asking you to match their intensity. They're not expecting you to feel things as deeply as they do. What they're asking for is honesty about where you are. If you can only give them 70%, they'd rather know that upfront than discover it later after they've already given you their whole heart. Because for a Scorpio, betrayal isn't just about infidelity or lies. Betrayal is about emotional dishonesty. It's about pretending to be all in when you're actually holding back. Secret number 3. They're not holding grudges. They're protecting their energy from repeat offenders. This one drives me crazy because it's so misunderstood. People love to say that Scorpios hold grudges, that they're vengeful, that they never forgive. But here's what's actually happening. Scorpios have incredibly long memories, especially when it comes to how people made them feel. And once someone has shown them who they really are, once someone has betrayed their trust or hurt them intentionally, Scorpios don't forget that. Not because they're petty, but because they're strategic about their emotional energy. Think about it from their perspective. If someone has proven themselves to be untrustworthy, if they've shown that they're willing to hurt you when it serves them, why would you give them another opportunity to do it again? That's not holding a grudge. That's pattern recognition. That's learning from experience and adjusting your boundaries accordingly. Scorpios understand something that a lot of other signs struggle with. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can forgive someone for what they did. You can release the anger and resentment. You can wish them well from a distance, and still decide that they don't get access to you anymore. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. I've watched Scorpios do this so many times. Someone hurts them, and they'll process that hurt deeply. They'll feel it. They'll examine it. They'll understand exactly what happened and why. And then they'll make a decision. If the person shows genuine remorse, if they take real accountability, if they demonstrate through consistent action that they've changed, a Scorpio might give them another chance. Might. But if the person makes excuses, if they minimize what they did, if they try to gaslight the Scorpio into thinking they're overreacting, that door closes, and it doesn't open again. This is what people interpret as holding grudges. But it's not about punishment. It's about self-preservation. Scorpios have learned, often through painful experience, that some people don't change. Some people will hurt you over and over if you let them. And Scorpios value their peace too much to keep letting the same people disturb it. Here's what's interesting though. While Scorpios are incredibly protective of their energy when it comes to people who've wronged them, they're also capable of profound forgiveness when someone genuinely earns it. If you hurt a Scorpio, but you own it completely, if you show them through your actions that you understand the impact of what you did and you're committed to being different, they can forgive in ways that are honestly beautiful. Because they understand transformation. They understand that people can change, can evolve, can become better versions of themselves. But you have to prove it. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. Scorpios need to see the change. They need to feel that your energy has shifted. They need evidence that you've done the internal work. And if you can show them that, if you can demonstrate that you're not the same person who hurt them, they'll give you another chance. But if you're just saying what you think they want to hear while your energy tells a different story, they'll see right through it. And that door will close permanently. Secret number 4. Their silence is more powerful than most people's words. Here's something I've noticed about Scorpios that I think is absolutely fascinating. When they go quiet, when they withdraw into that famous Scorpio silence, people panic, and they should. Because Scorpio silence isn't passive, it's active, it's strategic, and it's usually happening because they're processing something significant. Scorpios don't waste words. They don't fill silence with meaningless chatter. They don't talk just to hear themselves speak. When a Scorpio communicates, it's because they have something important to say. And when they don't communicate, it's because they're either observing, calculating, or deciding whether you're worth the energy of a response. I think this is why Scorpio's silence is so unnerving to people. Most of us are conditioned to fill awkward silences, to smooth over tension with words, to explain ourselves when we feel misunderstood. But Scorpios are comfortable in silence. They're comfortable letting tension exist without rushing to resolve it, because they understand that sometimes silence communicates more than any explanation could. When a Scorpio goes silent after a conflict, they're not giving you the silent treatment in a petty way. They're removing themselves from a situation that's become emotionally unsafe or unproductive. They're creating space to process their feelings without your energy interfering. They're deciding whether this relationship is worth fighting for, whether it's time to walk away. And that decision-making process, it happens in silence. Here's what people don't realize. During that silence, the Scorpio is replaying every interaction, analyzing every word, examining every pattern. They're not just thinking about what you said in the moment. They're thinking about how it connects to things you said 3 months ago. They're looking at the bigger picture. They're determining whether this is an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern of behavior. And when they emerge from that silence, they've usually made a decision. Either they've decided to address the issue directly, in which case you're about to have one of the most honest, potentially uncomfortable conversations of your life, or they've decided you're not worth the energy, in which case that silence might become permanent. This is why trying to force a Scorpio to talk before they're ready is such a mistake. When you push them to communicate before they've finished processing, you're not going to get their real thoughts. You're going to get a defensive reaction or a surface-level response that doesn't actually address what's really going on. But if you can respect their need for silence, if you can give them the space to work through whatever they're working through, when they do finally speak, what they say will be worth the wait. I've been watching this play out in relationships where one person is a Scorpio and the other isn't. The non-Scorpio will get anxious during the silence, start sending multiple texts, demand immediate responses, try to force resolution. And all of that just pushes the Scorpio further into their shell. Because what they're really asking for isn't complicated. They just need time to feel what they're feeling without having to perform or explain or manage someone else's anxiety about their process. And here's something else I've noticed. Scorpio silence often precedes transformation. When they go quiet, when they retreat into themselves, they're not just processing the current situation. They're often reevaluating everything. Their entire life, their relationships, their goals, their path. And when they emerged, they might be a completely different person than they were when they went in. This is the Pluto influence again. Death and rebirth, endings and new beginnings. And sometimes that silence is the death phase, the necessary destruction before something new can be built. Secret number 5. They test you constantly, but not because they enjoy it. Okay, this is going to be controversial, but I think it needs to be said. Scorpios test people constantly, and I don't mean in obvious ways. I mean in subtle, almost imperceptible ways that you might not even realize are tests until you've either passed or failed them. They'll tell you something personal and watch to see if you keep it confidential or if it somehow makes its way back to them through someone else. They'll create situations where you have to choose between them and something else to see what you prioritize. They'll be vulnerable with you and then pull back to see if you chase them or give them space. They'll disagree with you about something to see if you can handle conflict without becoming defensive or dismissive. And I know this sounds exhausting. I know it sounds like game playing. But here's what I've come to understand. Scorpios aren't testing you because they enjoy watching you squirm. They're testing you because they need to know if you're safe. They need to know if you're going to handle their intensity, their depth, their darkness with care. They need to know if you're going to run when things get real. Remember, Scorpios see beneath the surface. They know that people can present one version of themselves in the beginning and turn out to be completely different later. They've experienced the betrayal before, so they create these small tests, these little challenges, to see if your actions match your words, to see if you're consistent, to see if you're genuine. The thing is a reason for that. If you're being authentic, if you're being yourself, you'll pass these tests without even knowing they're happening. Because the tests aren't about performing or saying the right thing. They're about revealing who you really are when you think no one's watching. They're about showing your character in moments that seem insignificant but actually tell the Scorpio everything they need to know. I've seen people get really frustrated with this aspect of Scorpio energy. They feel like they're constantly being evaluated, constantly being judged. And in a way, they are. But it's not personal. It's not about you being inadequate. It's about the Scorpio protecting themselves from repeating past patterns where they trusted too quickly and got hurt. Here's what I think is important to understand. Once you've passed enough of these tests, once the Scorpio has gathered enough data to feel secure in who you are, the testing stops. Or at least it becomes much less frequent. Because at that point, they trust you, they know you. They've seen you in enough different situations to feel confident that you're not going to suddenly reveal yourself to be someone completely different. But getting to that point requires patience. It requires understanding that their caution isn't about you. It's about their history. It's about all the times they opened up too fast and got burned. It's about their deep need to protect the incredibly vulnerable heart that exists underneath all that intensity. Secret number 6. They're not obsessed with control. They're terrified of powerlessness. This is a big one. People love to say that Scorpios are control freaks, that they need to dominate every situation, that they can't handle not being in charge. But I think that completely misses what's actually happening. Scorpios aren't seeking control for control's sake. They're seeking control because they're deeply afraid of being powerless. And where does that fear come from? I think it comes from Scorpio's connection to the 8th house in astrology, which rules transformation, death, rebirth, and other people's resources. Scorpios understand, on a soul level, that life can change in an instant, that everything you think is stable can be ripped away, that you can be completely at the mercy of forces beyond your control. This awareness, this understanding of life's inherent instability and unpredictability, it creates a deep need to control whatever can be controlled. Not because they're power-hungry, but because they're trying to create safety in a world that feels fundamentally unsafe. Think about it. If you've experienced profound loss, if you've been through situations where you were completely powerless, where you had no say in what happened to you, wouldn't you try to prevent that from happening again? Wouldn't you try to maintain some level of control over your environment, your relationships, your life? This is why Scorpios can seem controlling in relationships. They want to know where you are, who you're with, what you're doing, not because they don't trust you, although trust is definitely part of it, but because knowing gives them a sense of security. It helps them feel less vulnerable to the chaos and unpredictability of life. But here's what's interesting. When a Scorpio really trusts you, when they feel genuinely safe with you, a lot of that need for control relaxes. Because what they're really looking for isn't control over you. It's the feeling that they won't be blindsided, that they won't be left powerless in a situation they didn't see coming, that you won't suddenly change the rules of the relationship without warning. I've watched Scorpios in healthy relationships, and what I've noticed is that they're actually incredibly capable of surrender when they feel safe. They can let go of control. They can be vulnerable. They can't trust the process. But that only happens when they've built enough evidence that the person they're with isn't going to use their vulnerability against them. This is also why Scorpios are so drawn to transformation and personal power work. They understand that the only real control we have in life is control over ourselves, over our reactions, over our internal state. So they become obsessed with self-mastery, with understanding their own psychology, with developing the inner strength to handle whatever life throws at them. And when you understand this about Scorpios, when you see that their need for control is really a need for safety, it changes how you interact with them. Instead of fighting their attempts to control, you can address the underlying fear. You can provide reassurance. You can be consistent and predictable in ways that help them feel secure. You can show them, through your actions, that they don't need to control you because you're not going to hurt them. Secret number 7. Their loyalty isn't blind. It's earned and maintained through reciprocity. Okay. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning. This is the secret that completely changed how I understand Scorpio energy. Because everyone talks about Scorpio loyalty like it's this unconditional, unwavering thing. Like once a Scorpio decides you're theirs, they'll stick with you no matter what. And that's partially true, but it's missing a crucial piece. Scorpio loyalty is fierce. Yes. Yes. It's the kind of loyalty that will have them defending you when you're not in the room, supporting you through your darkest moments, keeping your secrets until they die. But it's not blind, and it's not permanent if you violate the terms of the relationship. Here's what I've realized. Scorpios operate on a principle of reciprocity. They give you everything. Their time, their energy, their emotional depth, their unwavering support. But they expect you to meet them somewhere in the middle, not necessarily at the same intensity. Because they understand not everyone operates at their level. But they expect effort. They expect consistency. They expect you to show up. And if you don't, if you take their loyalty for granted, if you start treating them like they'll always be there no matter how you behave, that loyalty will evaporate. Not slowly, not with warnings. It'll just be gone one day. Because Scorpios have a breaking point, and once you cross it, once they decide you're not honoring the relationship the way they are, they're done. I've seen this happen so many times. Someone has a Scorpio in their life. A friend, a partner, a family member, and they get comfortable. They start assuming the Scorpio will always be there, always be loyal, always have their back, so they stop putting in effort. They cancel plans last minute. They don't return calls. They take without giving. They prioritize other people. And the Scorpio watches all of this. They notice every slight, every broken promise, every moment where they weren't prioritized. And then one day, the Scorpio is just gone. They've cut the person off completely. And the person is shocked. They can't understand what happened. They thought the Scorpio was loyal. They thought the relationship was solid. But what they didn't realize is that they'd been slowly draining the loyalty bank account without making any deposits. And eventually, the account went into the negative, and the Scorpio closed it. This is what people mean when they say Scorpios are all nothing. It's not that they can't do moderation. It's that once they've decided you're not meeting them with the same level of care and commitment they're giving you. They'd rather have nothing than continue in an imbalanced dynamic. And here's the thing that makes this so powerful. When a Scorpio cuts you off, when they decide you're no longer worth their loyalty, there's usually no going back. They won't engage in drama. They won't explain themselves. They won't give you closure. They'll just remove you from their life with the same intensity they once included you in it. And that finality, that absolute ending, it's one of the most Scorpio things there is. But on the flip side, if you honor a Scorpio's loyalty, if you reciprocate their care, if you show up for them the way they show up for you, you'll have an ally for life. Someone who will go to war for you. Someone who will celebrate your wins like they're their own. Someone who will hold you through your losses without judgment. Someone who will see you at your absolute worst and love you anyway. That's the deal with Scorpio loyalty. It's not free. It's not automatic. But once you've earned it, once you've proven yourself worthy of it, it's one of the most valuable things you'll ever have. Secret number 8. They're not dark and brooding. They're comfortable with the full spectrum of human experience. I think this might be the most damaging stereotype about Scorpios. That they're dark, brooding, obsessed with death and destruction. That they're negative or pessimistic or can't enjoy the light moments in life. And honestly, that couldn't be further from the truth. What Scorpios actually are is comfortable with the full range of human emotion and experience. They don't shy away from the dark stuff. The painful stuff. The uncomfortable stuff that most people try to avoid. But they also don't live there. They're not wallowing in darkness. They're just not afraid of it. Think about it this way. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid pain. Trying to stay in the light. Trying to maintain a positive mindset at all times. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it creates this situation where huge parts of the human experience become taboo. We're not supposed to talk about death. We're not supposed to acknowledge our shadow sides. We're not supposed to sit with grief or anger or jealousy or fear. But Scorpios understand that those emotions, those experiences, they're part of being human. And by avoiding them, by pretending they don't exist, we actually give them more power over us. So Scorpios do the opposite. They look directly at the darkness. They examine it. They understand it. They integrate it. And by doing that, they rob it of its power to control them. This is why Scorpios can seem morbid or intense to people who aren't used to this level of emotional honesty. A Scorpio will talk about death at a dinner party. They'll bring up uncomfortable truths in casual conversation. They'll ask you questions about your deepest fears or your biggest regrets. Not because they're trying to be edgy or dark, but because they're genuinely interested in the full truth of who you are. Not just the polished version you show the world. And here's what's beautiful about this. Because Scorpios are comfortable with darkness, they're also capable of experiencing joy, pleasure, and light in incredibly profound ways. They don't take happiness for granted. They don't numb themselves to positive experiences. When a Scorpio laughs, it's genuine. It's deep. When they celebrate, they're fully present. I don't think most people understand this about Scorpios. They assume that someone who's willing to look at the darkness must be consumed by it. But the opposite is true. Scorpios have integrated their shadow, which means they're actually freer than most people. They're not running from parts of themselves. They're not pretending to be something they're not. They've looked at every ugly, uncomfortable, shameful part of their psyche and said, okay, this is also me, and I accept it. And that acceptance, that willingness to be whole rather than just good, it gives them a kind of power that's honestly rare. Because when you're not afraid of your own darkness, other people's darkness doesn't scare you either. You can sit with someone in their pain without trying to fix it or make it go away. You can hold space for the full complexity of human experience without needing to simplify it or make it more palatable. This is why Scorpios make such incredible friends during crisis moments. When your life is falling apart, when you're going through something devastating, when you're in the depths of grief or despair, a Scorpio won't try to cheer you up or tell you to look on the bright side. They'll sit in the darkness with you. They'll validate that yes, this is terrible, and you have every right to feel what you're feeling. And somehow, that presence, that willingness to not run from your pain, it's more healing than any attempt at forced positivity could ever be. But then, when you're ready, when you've processed what you need to process, that same Scorpio will be the one celebrating your joy with equal intensity. They'll be genuinely happy for your wins. They'll encourage your pleasure. They'll support your healing. Because they understand that life is both, and there's a reason for that. Not either or. It's darkness and light, pain and joy, death and rebirth. And trying to have one without the other is trying to live half a life. Secret number 9. Their transformation isn't optional. It's their life's work. Here's something I don't think people fully grasp about Scorpio energy. Transformation isn't just something Scorpios go through occasionally. It's not a phase or a response to crisis. Transformation is their entire purpose. It's what they're here to do, both for themselves and often for the people around them. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, of destruction and regeneration. And that planetary influence means that Scorpios are constantly in a state of becoming. They're never static. They're never satisfied with staying the same. They're always shedding old versions of themselves and emerging as something new. I've watched this happen with Scorpios I know, and it's honestly fascinating. They'll go through these intense periods of transformation where everything in their life changes. Their career, their relationships, their beliefs, their entire identity. And it's not because they're unstable or can't commit to anything. It's because they've outgrown who they were, and they're not willing to stay in a version of themselves that no longer fits. This is why Scorpios can seem unpredictable to people who don't understand this about them. You think you know who they are, you think you've figured them out, and then suddenly they're someone completely different. They've cut their hair, changed their career, ended a long-term relationship, moved to a new city, adopted an entirely new philosophy of life, and you're left wondering what happened. When did this change occur? But here's the thing. The change didn't happen suddenly. It was happening the whole time, beneath the surface. In that internal world that Scorpios guard so carefully, they were processing, questioning, examining, dismantling old beliefs and building new ones. And by the time you see the external change, the internal transformation has already been complete for a while. This is also why Scorpios are so drawn to psychology, spirituality, and any kind of deep personal work. They're not interested in surface-level self-improvement. They want to understand the root of things. They want to excavate their unconscious patterns. They want to face their shadow, integrate their trauma, and emerge as more whole, more authentic, more powerful versions of themselves. And this drive for transformation, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone around them. Scorpios have this way of catalyzing change in other people, often without even trying. Their presence, their questions, their refusal to accept superficial answers, it forces people to look at themselves more honestly, to confront things they've been avoiding, to grow in ways they weren't planning to grow. I think this is why relationships with Scorpios can be so intense and life-changing. It's not just about the emotional depth or the passion. It's that being close to a Scorpio means you can't stay stagnant. They won't let you. Not because they're trying to change you or fix you, but because their energy naturally pulls people toward their own transformation. Being around a Scorpio is like being around a catalyst. Things that were dormant start to activate. Things that were hidden start to surface. And you're forced to either grow or leave. And here's what I find really interesting. Scorpios don't fear the death part of transformation the way most people do. Most of us resist change because we're afraid of losing who we are. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of the discomfort that comes with growth. But Scorpios understand that death is necessary for rebirth. That you can't become something new without letting go of something old. That transformation requires a kind of dying, a release of the old identity, the old patterns, the old way of being. So when a Scorpio goes through a major life change, when they end a relationship or quit a job or completely reinvent themselves, they're not running from something. They're running toward their next evolution. They're answering a call from their soul that says it's time to shed this skin and grow a new one. And they trust that process. Even when it's painful. Even when it's scary. Even when everyone around them thinks they're making a mistake. This is the Scorpio superpower that I think gets overlooked. Their ability to die and be reborn. Over and over again. Throughout their lifetime. To release what no longer serves them with a finality that's almost ruthless. To walk away from entire chapters of their life without looking back. To trust that whatever comes next will be exactly what they need. Even if they can't see it yet. Secret number 10. They don't want to be understood by everyone. Just by the right people. This is the final secret. And I think it might be the most important one. Because so much of the Scorpio experience is about being misunderstood. Being labeled. Being reduced to stereotypes that don't capture the full truth of who they are. And I think that bothers people more than it bothers the Scorpios themselves. Here's what I've realized. Scorpios aren't trying to be understood by everyone. They're not trying to make themselves more palatable or accessible to people who aren't willing to do the work of really seeing them. They're okay with being a mystery to most people. They're okay with being misunderstood, misjudged, even feared. Because they know that the people who matter, the people who are meant to be in their inner circle, those people will get it. Those people will see past the intensity and the guardedness and the tests. Those people will recognize the depth, the loyalty, the profound capacity for love that exists underneath all the protective layers. And I think this is actually a really healthy approach to life. Not everyone deserves access to your full self. Not everyone has earned the right to see your vulnerability. Not everyone is capable of handling your depth. And Scorpios understand this instinctively. They're not interested in being liked by everyone. They're interested in being truly known by a select few. This is why Scorpios often have small, tight-knit social circles. They're not collecting acquaintances. They're not trying to be popular. They're building a chosen family of people who've proven themselves trustworthy, who can match their intensity, who won't run when things get real, and those relationships, those deep, soul-level connections, they're worth more to a Scorpio than 1,000 superficial friendships. I've seen Scorpios be completely comfortable with the fact that most people don't get them. They'll hear the stereotypes, the jokes about being intense or scary or too much, and they'll just shrug. Because they know those labels are coming from people who've only seen the surface. People who haven't earned the privilege of seeing what's underneath. And they're not interested in defending themselves or explaining themselves to people who've already made up their minds. But when a Scorpio finds someone who does get them, someone who sees past the armor to the incredibly tender heart underneath, someone who can handle their intensity and match their depth, that's when the magic happens. That's when you see a Scorpio fully open up. That's when you realize that all the intensity, all the testing, all the guardedness, it was protecting something incredibly precious. A capacity for love and loyalty and connection that's honestly rare in this world. And here's what I want you to understand. Whether you're a Scorpio or you love one, that selectivity, that refusal to be understood by everyone, it's not a flaw. It's not something that needs to be fixed or softened. It's a feature. It's a boundary. It's a way of protecting something sacred from people who wouldn't treat it with the care it deserves. Scorpios know their worth. They know the value of what they're offering, and they're not willing to give it away to people who won't appreciate it, who won't reciprocate it, who won't honor it. And honestly, I think more people could learn from that. More people could benefit from being more selective about who they let into their inner world. More people could protect their energy the way Scorpios do. Because at the end of the day, Scorpio energy isn't about being difficult or complicated or too much. It's about being authentic. It's about refusing to water yourself down to make other people comfortable. It's about knowing that you deserve relationships that match your depth, your intensity, your capacity for profound connection. And it's about being willing to wait for those relationships, even if it means spending time alone, even if it means being misunderstood by people who were never meant to understand you anyway. So if you're a Scorpio reading this, I hope you feel seen. I hope you recognize yourself in these 10 secrets, and I hope you know that your intensity, your depth, your refusal to do anything halfway, it's not too much. It's exactly right. You're not meant to be understood by everyone. You're meant to be deeply known by the people who matter. And those people, they're out there. They're looking for exactly what you have to offer. And when you find them, when you connect with people who can match your energy and honor your depth, you'll understand why you had to be so selective all along. And if you love a Scorpio, if you're trying to understand one, I hope these secrets have given you a new perspective. I hope you can see past the stereotypes to the truth of what Scorpio energy really is. It's not about being dark or vengeful or controlling. It's about being real. It's about refusing to settle for surface-level connection. It's about having the courage to look at the full spectrum of human experience, the light and the dark, and embrace all of it. Scorpios are here to transform, to go deep, to see what others miss. They're here to remind us that real connection requires vulnerability, that loyalty must be earned and maintained, that intensity isn't something to fear but something to celebrate. They're here to show us that it's okay to have standards, to protect your energy, to be selective about who you let into your life. They're here to prove that transformation is possible, that we can and be reborn, that we don't have to stay stuck in versions of ourselves that no longer fit. And maybe that's the real secret about Scorpios. They're not trying to be mysterious or intimidating or hard to understand. They're just being themselves, fully and unapologetically. And in a world that constantly asks us to be less, to tone it down, to make ourselves smaller and more palatable, that authenticity, that refusal to compromise who they are, it's actually revolutionary. It's a reminder that we all have permission to be our full selves, to demand relationships that